All right, good evening, everyone. How are we doing today?
Morning.
Nice.
Good luck.
So let's go right into it. Actually, today I might have to leave a little bit earlier, but let's go into it. So there are two chapters I would like us to focus on because I think they are the most associated or related to what we do here. And the first one is this one of do lots of deliberate
Right.
practice. Do lots of deliberate practice. Who has who wants to comment? Who would like to start? Who would like to say something about that particular chapter?
Someone.
How can it be related to the education? I mean, it's no coincidence that I chose that one.
Yeah, because this
Tell
one,
me.
the article that catch me first. So it's
Mm,
like we have already, as much as you practice, as much as you improve your coding skills. So
mm,
it's all about practicing, and that's what you did keep telling us all the time.
exactly. But also there's it's not only about practicing, but if I had to add a word to it, is doing deliberate practice in the sense of not only focusing on those things that you feel comfortable with, but also focusing and working on those aspects that you do not feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So, for example, if just to give an example, if you feel that creating or handling recycler views it's something complex because it involves the usage of creating an adapter, creating a view holder, and all that stuff, then practice more of that. Create applications on your for yourself that requires the usage of that particular component so that you can become more and more comfortable with it. Exactly. Also, who I mean, right now the majority of you are in the education, so you already have a lot of work to do with the education. But at some point, you will be working on your own apps. Like you want to continue, you're going to be done with the education. You want to do your own apps, and you need to remember always that there's a difference or a mindset about why am I doing this project. There's a lot of people that say, okay, I'm going to do this project, but I just want to finish it quickly. But if the intention of the project is for learning, then it doesn't really matter how much it takes. It should instead, the focus be, how can I learn the most out of it? You see what I
Yeah.
mean? Any thoughts on that? Enrique, I
Well,
know, for example, you have worked on apps on your for yourself beyond the education. How has it been?
for me is I actually have one in mind now that I would like to try. But for
Mm,
me, the hard part is to actually get the idea of the app. Like,
mm.
what should I do? What app should I do? What the app should be? That's the hard part for me. I don't know how people actually do it. But
There's two.
this
No,
one
sorry.
that I plan is
Finish.
because that I'm playing a video game, and that video game
Mm,
has a system, and I would
mm.
like to have an app to have that system on the app, so I can, instead of checking Google, I'll check the app. And there's a huge database, and then I will use Room and all the stuff. And I was like, oh,
And
this is a perfect usage of this thing that I don't know much about.
but why do you want to create an app? Do you have
That's
like
that's
do you
the
have a
hard part for me.
no. You said that you have an idea for this
Mhm.
particular game. Is the app solving a problem? Like, are you
It's a
having a
convenience app.
problem?
It's a
It's a
convenience app.
convenience. So it makes
Meaning,
your life easier.
yeah, instead of Googling the thing, I can just go into the app and check the result on the app.
Well, you just answered one of your questions. You mentioned that you don't know sometimes, okay, what should the app be? Well,
Mm,
don't look at it from that perspective. Instead, ask the question, what is a problem or a boring task that I have to do often, or a tedious task that I have to do often? Probably this Googling stuff is one of those, for you at least. Create an app that solves the problem. Yeah.
yeah.
So, in other words, don't think like, don't focus the question on what should I create an app. Instead, focus the question on what is a problem, a tediousness, or something that I would like to automate? And then when you find such a problem, you go from there. You see, so find a problem that, or a situation that for you is a problem. It doesn't have to be like you're going to change the world. At least if it changes your world, it's more than enough. You see, that's one way of looking at it. The second way, which is, I would say, a little bit easier because you don't have to think as much, is you ask yourself, okay, what is something that I want to learn? What is a component that is out there that I want to learn? An easy example, you could say, okay, Jetpack Compose. So in that case, you have a problem. You want to gain knowledge with a specific component. So then you say, okay, I'm just going to create any app. Doesn't really matter. If it's, you can repeat an app that you already did, but this time you're going to apply this new knowledge. So now in that second perspective, you revolve around a very specific knowledge that you want to gain, and it doesn't really matter where you apply it. Now, if you can find an app that
Have both.
an idea that do both, it's even better. You practice whatever it is that you want to practice, and at the same time you solve the problem that it is being tedious for you. So many of my own apps were a combination mostly of a knowledge that I wanted to gain. And then I thought, okay, to make it a little bit more interesting, what could be something that I want to solve, a problem that I want to solve? So I always did it like that. But in my case, mostly it began because I wanted to learn something. Call it database, call it Firebase, call it a specific animation, whatever it is. You go ahead, you find a context. And when it's like that, when you only want to learn about it, then you can pretty much reuse apps that you already did. You just either refactor them or just create them from scratch using the new knowledge that you want to practice. That's my recommendation.
Yeah. How many apps of your own do you have on your phone that you use like quite regularly?
I would say at this moment, only one that was for books that I use for keeping track of books. The thing is, I stopped doing that because two reasons. Eventually you need to maintain them, and it becomes a headache having to maintain these apps. I don't have the time for that anymore. So now the majority of the software that I create and the software that I maintain is the software that I give to you guys, the auto grading, the plugin, all that stuff, because now I have a real motivation. I have the students that actually use it. Before it was only me. I mean, yeah. So in the majority of my apps, I don't really use them that much anymore. I have them though. I have the repository, because every now and then, guess what I do? When I want to implement something, I go back to see. So I use them more as
a library.
Yes, like yeah, exactly. Like for guiding myself on stuff. Like how did I do that? Because I know that I have done this before, and I go back to it and so on. I have used them, or nowadays I use them more for that than for actual usage. Yeah, but it's like that. You build your repositories, you build your apps, you build your things, and you go from there. And so deliberate practice, and you need to practice. Hopefully, I mean, in the education, there's a lot of problems to do, but beyond that, you need to continue. Any thoughts on that, Khaled? For example, you have already finished. How is it going after graduation?
Yeah, actually, doing the same things, the same. You will have the same skills like debugging and do the same applications. But what I understood from this section, the liberating practice, is that you allocate some time every day for new things. So you learn it and then you apply it. With time, you will expand your knowledge.
Exactly.
Yes. And exactly. That's what I do. Now I am working on Jetpack Compose. I learn and do some applications. So expand my knowledge on this part actually.
Exactly. No, that is correct. And again, the key is that it's not only about practicing, but practicing those things that are challenging for you, whatever it could be at that specific moment in time. Okay. Good. Let's continue. The other one that I want to work on is on page 48. Don't be
Don't
afraid
be afraid.
to break things.
Break.
If you're working with code, this is, I don't think it's a tough question. Let me try to ask the question properly. You're working with code, okay? Let's say the homework. Besides the Kotlin, what is the other system that we use in the education? We use the Kotlin, and what is the other system that we use for, okay, to submit the homework? What do we use?
Git.
GitHub.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Now you understand. What role does Git play in all of this of not being afraid? Is there any relationship between not being afraid and Git?
Oh, the fact that you can always go back, so you can just do stuff, break it, not break it, and then if you break it, then you just go back and start over.
To the previous
Exactly.
code.
Exactly.
That's why it's kind of important to like keep the commits kind of short spaced, because if you make like a huge change and then you break it, then you have to go. You cannot track where you break it, so you can go back baby steps instead of going back like to a whole new thing. Although, even though you can still go back to a whole new thing, but adding small steps between changes makes it more
less risky.
less
Less
risky.
risky.
It
Mhm.
fractures the code more, so you can go back baby steps. Like, oh, I want to change one function that I changed in this commit just like 1 hour ago. Boom.
Mhm.
Actually, Android Studio has one wonderful thing. It has its own cache of history for the project. So if you go to any file, right click it, and local history, you can see a bunch of changes made to that in disregards from Git. So I use that a lot as well, just to see,
Mhm.
oh, how it was before. Okay.
Exactly. So Git plays a big role in all of this. You need to become comfortable, or you need to get into the habit of using it, in the sense that, as I have said, Git is not something that we're using for submitting homework. I mean, yes, it plays that role, but Git was not designed for that. Git is a version control system. By definition, if you take appropriate steps, as Enrique mentioned, if you have good habits of committing frequently, you are going to be able to build a history so that if you break something, you can just go back. So there is really no reason why you should be afraid of experimenting. There should be no reason why you should be afraid of refactoring. There should be no reason why you should be afraid of trying out different implementations, basically. Okay. Because once again, if you know you have this kind of backup, this history, you can not only revert to the last working version, but also you can do some detective work in case previous commits generated a problem. But as you said, if you have one massive commit that has hundreds of files, okay, hundreds might be a little bit of exaggeration, but even 10 or 20 files, depends on the content, but it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. So although this particular chapter doesn't speak about Git in any way, I do feel that it goes to this discussion, in the sense of you shouldn't be afraid when doing your homework, you're doing your projects, to try things out. You can always go back, assuming that you do commit frequently. Khaled, go ahead, please.
I just want to comment that on this way, there is some hesitation to come back and start from the beginning to the source code. Like, for example, if you are working with a team on an application, and then suddenly there is, for example, as we are on the internship working on the application about the food, and there in the future some features like discount on the sale or something, and you find it becoming more complicated to apply that new feature. So now you need to come back from the beginning and separate features to apply this new one. And to be honest, it will be some hesitation about coming back or risk something on the code refactoring and this stuff. But from this unit, the book we read that encourage it to come back and start again, it will be helpful. And yes, that's.
There's also, we did not cover this in the education. This is something I'm planning to add for coming, for our coming generation. And that is unit testing. Think of unit testing as riding a bicycle with a helmet. You know that ideally, when you're riding a bicycle, you hope that you don't fall. But if you do fall and you have a helmet, at the very least, you know that, assuming it's not that are very big stuff, you know that you're going to be kind of protected. You see what I mean? Writing code without test would be almost the equivalent, making an analogy, of riding a bicycle without a helmet. You run the risk of falling, and if you do fall and hit your head, you could be in trouble. Okay, so going back to your question or to your statement, Khaled, one way of addressing that hesitation is by writing test cases on your software. We didn't cover that on your generation, but by you having test cases, you know that if you make changes to the code and those changes then break the test, then you know, okay, I might have introduced some bug, for example. It depends on the change that you do. But let's say, purely speaking, you make a refactoring in which the behavior should stay exactly the same, only the implementation changed. Then this test suite is going to help you identify whether or not the refactoring that you just did broke or changed the behavior compared to what it was before. Yeah, so that is one way of addressing that. And of course, if you combine that to this part of don't be afraid, then you know that if you have your test in place, if you know you have a Git history, you know that you can make changes and not be as hesitant as you could be if you didn't have those two things on your side. Okay.
Yes.
So that would be one thing for all of you to practice test cases or unit testing. That would be an area that if you don't have an idea on what to study, that could be one of them. And this is not Android. This is this concept of, there's a philosophy also called test-driven development.
Yeah.
And this is something that is applicable to any type of software development. It's not an Android thing, it's not a Kotlin thing, it's a software development thing. So you can then learn it with Kotlin because that's the programming language you already know. So that could be one thing to look into. Okay,
it's actually embedded in Android Studio. They have a lot of unit testing tools like right into the project the UI for the UI.
Yeah,
mostly.
but that's not what I mean when I say unit testing. I mean more like there's a how do you call this? Recommendations and things you need to keep in mind whenever you write test. And again, this has nothing to do with Android per se. It's more, yes, Android has specific UI testing, but that's not what I meant. But yeah, that's another topic. But that will be something for you guys to look into to further expand on your education. Good. Let's do one more. The page 50. Don't be cute with your test data. So this is actually related to what we're speaking. Any thoughts on this? Any thoughts on this particular chapter?
I read the first paragraph and I was like, oh, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. And now I'm paranoid because now I have to go through the whole homework and look for those things. So exactly. Yeah, it happens.
Exactly. So it is important based on this particular chapter that whenever you write comment, I mean, you have no idea. It's surprising because in the bus in like the Vestrafik, you know, the computers that tell you like the minutes for the different stops. Not very often, but every now and then I have seen error messages that were written that those error messages should have not been there. You see what I mean? They say things. I mean, they don't do any insults or anything like that, but you can definitely tell that it was not supposed to be there, based on the information they provide. But yeah, exactly. So what I would say based on this is you have to remember that you have to assume, or you cannot assume that your code will be private or that an error message will only be available internally, because yeah, you don't know what could happen. And in general, you, as we have already explained, you shouldn't be writing comments and paragraphs in your code. That doesn't belong there. So, and especially if you have a Git history, because that's still recorded through the history. You can manipulate the history, yes, but still, you shouldn't be writing certain things in there. So please keep that in mind. Actually, just a fun story. I received once, I took a screenshot, but I don't think I have it anymore. It was for an app, don't remember which one. I received a notification and it says testing to see, it was something like testing if Rick got it. I'm like, what? And then it didn't make sense. And what I think, they were testing the delivery of push notifications, but probably they did it on production and I received it. So I wanted to put it like, Rick, just to let you know that I did receive it. But anyways, you have to be careful with those things. And you have to be careful with those things. Good. Any last comments? Any last questions? Any last thoughts about these chapters that we read?
Good. It's actually a good book, and we are not even halfway done yet. So
yeah, exactly. We still have a lot more, but yeah, as you can see, they are little like
snippets,
tips, exactly, tips and recommendations to keep in mind whenever you're writing code and writing software. So yeah, remember to practice. Remember to don't be afraid of breaking things, and remember to not be cute with your test cases as well. Nice. So let's keep it up to here then.
Yep.
And then let's see each other next week.
Yes.
Okay. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.